My mouth tasted like an old coin, and my left arm hung at my side, like an empty sleeve stuffed with wet sand. But my ears, damn it. My ears were working with a painful clarity. I am Sylvia, I am 73 years old, and for 4 decades I ran the largest hardware store in the district without my hand ever trembling. What my sons, those 2 vultures in ties I have for offspring, did not know as they muttered in the corner of my hospital room is that facial paralysis does not mean your intelligence is paralyzed too. The doctor had been clear. A transient ischemic attack, Mrs. Vance. It was mild. With therapy and patience, you will recover almost all your mobility. Mild. That was the key word. I was alive, I was conscious, and above all, I was furious. But my sons, Richard and Stephen, seemed to have heard a different sentence. To them, that little clot in my brain was not a health warning, but the starting gun for a race to get my inheritance. She cannot live alone, Richard. It is crazy, said Stephen, the youngest, the one who always had a spine made of jelly. He rubbed his hands nervously, a tic he inherited from his father. May he rest in peace. I know. That is why I spoke to the director of Sunset Meadows. They have a shared room available if we make the deposit today, replied Richard, my firstborn, the one with gambling debts he thinks I do not know about. His voice had that sickly sweet fake tone he uses when he wants to sell me a lie. It is what is best for her. Mom needs special care 24 hours a day. She is not making sense anymore, Stephen. Look at her. I was sitting on the edge of the bed with the hospital gown open at the back, feeling exposed and ridiculous. I tried to speak, to tell them to go to hell, that I could pay for a nurse at my house, but the words came out mushy, slurred, as if my tongue were swollen. I managed to articulate some sounds, but it sounded more like a drunkard's babble than an order. Richard looked at me with a pity that turned my stomach. He walked over and patted me on my good shoulder, like someone petting a mangy dog before taking it to the pound. Calm down, Mom. Do not strain yourself. We will take care of everything. You will see. You will be taken care of better than a queen. The injustice was not a sharp blow. It was a cold tide that rose from my feet to my throat. They did not ask me. They did not consult my opinion. They did not care that I was the woman who paid for their private colleges, the one who bought their first cars, the one who built a business among screws, cement, and rough men when I was widowed in my 40s. To them, I was no longer Sylvia, the matriarch of the Anvil hardware. Now I was an old, cumbersome piece of furniture, a logistical problem that had to be filed away in an old people's warehouse so they could take over the house and the accounts. They took me to my apartment the next day, supposedly to pick up some things. The ride in Richard's car was silent. I looked out the window, watching the city move at its frantic pace, feeling like I was disconnecting from the world of the living. My left hand rested uselessly on my lap, and every time I tried to move my fingers, I only got a spasmodic tremor. It was frustrating, yes, but it was not the end of the world. I had dealt with scamming suppliers, economic crises, robberies, and the death of my husband. Was a numb arm going to defeat me? No, what was killing me was the betrayal. Upon entering my apartment, the smell of being closed up hit me. It was my sanctuary, my accounting books stacked on the mahogany desk, my collection of antique clocks in the display case. Not those porcelain nonsense things that other women collect, but mechanical clocks that I repaired myself, and the respectful silence of my things. But that silence was immediately broken by the sound of packing tape. "Let's be practical," Richard said, entering my bedroom without asking permission. "Just comfortable clothes, Mom. You do not need the tailored suits or the high heels. They give you gowns at the home. And the jewelry, it is better if we keep it in a safe deposit box, just in case it gets lost there," Stephen added, avoiding looking me in the eye while opening my jewelry box. Sitting in my reading chair, I watched them dismantle my life. I felt a hot, solitary tear roll down my left cheek, the one I could not feel very well. It was not sadness, it was rage, pure, distilled, and corrosive rage. They were looting me right to my face, using my illness as an alibi. Mom does not realize it, they thought. Mom is not here anymore. But Mom was very present. While Richard stuffed my nightgowns into a cheap suitcase, my mind, that old but infallible calculator, started adding and subtracting. They thought they were in control because I was physically weak. They assumed that power lay in who could carry the boxes or drive the car. They forgot that true power in this family, for 30 years, resided in a signature and a small black leather notebook that I guarded jealously. I remembered all the times I forgave them, the debts Richard racked up when his fantasy businesses failed, the time Stephen came crying because his wife had kicked him out, and I gave him a roof and food without asking for explanations. I had raised them to be good men, but apparently I only raised parasites waiting for the host to weaken to devour it. Done, Richard said, closing the suitcase with a sharp thud. The car is downstairs. Let's go, Mom. We do not want to be late for admission. They have strict schedules for dinner. They helped me up. I felt heavy, clumsy. The cane they had bought me at the pharmacy felt foreign in my right hand. We walked toward the door. I took one last look at my apartment. I saw the dust dancing in a ray of sunlight coming through the window. I saw my entire life summarized in objects that would soon be sold or given away. "It is for your own good," Stephen repeated, as if trying to convince himself. I did not argue. I did not scream. I did not make the scene they probably feared. I simply nodded, my head down, playing the role of the defeated old lady they wanted to see. I let them guide me to the elevator, dragging my left leg with a little more drama than necessary. But as we went down, something changed inside me. The resignation evaporated, replaced by a tactical coldness. I was Sylvia, the woman who once made a thief run out of her store with a wrench in her hand. I was not going to end my days eating flavorless Jell-O and staring at a white wall while my sons spent my money on sports cars and vacations. We got in the car, Richard at the wheel, Stephen in the passenger seat, me in the back like a package. The engine roared. "We are going straight there, right?" Stephen asked. "Yes, I will cut across the main avenue and we will be there in 20 minutes, Richard replied, looking in the rearview mirror to make sure I was not dying back there. That was when I spoke. I cleared my throat, focusing on every muscle in my mouth, forcing my tongue to obey. "No," I said. My voice came out hoarse but firm, much clearer than in the hospital. They both turned around, surprised. "What did you say, Mom?" Richard asked, frowning. "I said we are not going straight there," I repeated, vocalizing with effort but absolute clarity. "I need to stop by the bank before going to that place." Richard let out a nervous laugh. "To the bank? Mom, please, it is Saturday. They are about to close, and besides, you do not need money. Everything is paid for at the home. We are taking care of the finances now." "It is my money," I said, locking my eyes on his through the rearview mirror. "And if you want me to sign the admission to that nursing home voluntarily, you will take me to the bank. If not, when we get there, I will start screaming that you are kidnapping me until the police come. And believe me, I still have the lungs to do it." A thick silence filled the car. Stephen looked at Richard in panic. Richard gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. They knew I was not joking. They knew that tone. It was the tone I used when a customer did not want to pay an overdue invoice. "Mom, it is a waste of time," Richard tried to negotiate. "To the bank, downtown branch, now." Richard snorted, slammed his palm against the steering wheel, and swerved sharply to change lanes. Okay. If that makes you happy and calms you down, we will go to the bank. After all, 5 minutes will not change anything." 5 minutes, I thought, as I watched the city buildings pass by. Poor fools. They had no idea what could be done in 5 minutes if you had the right key and a will of steel. They thought the trip to the bank was a whim of a senile old woman who wanted to take out $100 to keep in her pocket. They thought it was my last act of useless stubbornness. They did not know that in that branch was not just my money. There was my dignity, my history, and above all, the instrument of my revenge. I carried my old purse with me, the one Richard had tried to leave at the house, but that I gripped with my good fingers as if it were a life preserver. Inside, in a secret compartment that not even the worn leather revealed to the naked eye, was the key to safe deposit box number 714. And in my memory, intact and sharp, was the combination that would change the destiny of this miserable afternoon. The car stopped in front of the bank's imposing glass and steel facade. Richard turned off the engine with an abrupt gesture. "I will go with you," he said, taking off his seatbelt. "You cannot walk alone." "Yes, come with me," I replied. And for the first time since the stroke, a half-smile, crooked but genuine, formed on my face. "I am going to need witnesses." I got out of the car leaning on Stephen, feeling the pavement under my feet. The afternoon sun hit my face, but I did not feel hot. I felt the cold adrenaline of the impending battle. My sons flanked me, impatient, checking their watches, wondering how long it would take to get rid of me. We walked into the bank. The air conditioning was blasting. The security guard, Arthur, an older man who had known me for 20 years, stood up straighter when he saw me. "Mrs. Vance, what a miracle to see you," he said, noticing my cane and my slow pace. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is excellent, Arthur." I lied with the firmest voice I could muster. "I am just here to settle some urgent business with my sons." Richard nudged me slightly toward the teller area, but I stopped dead and turned to the left, toward the personalized service and safe deposit boxes area. "It is not this way, Mom," Richard whispered, irritated. "I know where I am going," I muttered. I walked straight toward the desk of the manager, Patty, a meticulous woman who respected me because I had never missed a payment. Upon seeing me, she stood up immediately. "Mrs. Vance, come in, come in. How can we help you?" I sat down in the chair in front of her desk, letting the cane drop to the side with a clatter. My sons stood behind me like two towers of impatience. "I want to access my safe deposit box," I said, pulling the little gold key out of my purse with trembling fingers. "And I need you to prepare the forms to revoke all power of attorney associated with my accounts. All of them. Today." I felt Richard's breath catch behind my back. Stephen let out a small gasp. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Richard chimed in, his voice an octave higher than normal. "You cannot do that now. We are in a hurry. The lady is not feeling well, Patty. She has had a medical episode." I raised my good hand and slammed it on the desk. Bam! The sound echoed throughout the branch, silencing the murmurs of the other customers. "I am perfectly lucid, Richard," I said, spinning the chair around to face them. My crooked face must have looked grotesque, but I did not care. I wanted them to see the monster they had awakened. "You decided that I am no longer useful, that I am an old piece of junk that needs to be put away. Perfect. I agree to go to the home, but I will go as a poor woman." "What?" asked Stephen, pale as a ghost. "If I go into that nursing home, you will not see a single penny." "I am going to freeze everything. The hardware store accounts, the investment funds, my life savings. Everything stays locked until I say so." "And the safe deposit box?" "Ah, the safe deposit box has something you do not even know exists." Richard turned red with rage. He leaned toward me, forgetting all appearances. "You cannot do this to us. We have rights. We are your sons." "And I am your mother," I replied, looking at him with a coldness that made him step back. "And a mother teaches lessons. This is the lesson about loyalty." I turned to the manager, who was watching us with wide eyes, looking back and forth between my furious sons and me. "Patty, dear, bring me the paperwork. And call the bank's notary. We are going to make this legal and final before they take me to my golden retirement." Richard tried to grab my arm, but Arthur the guard had already approached, sensing trouble. "Sir, I am going to ask you not to touch the customer," Arthur said in a deep voice. I settled into the chair, feeling the blood start to pump through my veins with force again. The pain in my left arm seemed to have lessened. It was not a medical miracle. It was the power of taking back control. I had spent the last few days feeling like a victim, a dry leaf blown by the wind. But in that bank, surrounded by forms and the smell of money and bureaucracy, I remembered who I was. I looked at my sons. They were bewildered, furious, scared. They had underestimated the old hardware store lady. They thought the stroke had taken away my claws, but it had only sharpened my fangs. "Sit down," I ordered, pointing to the waiting chairs. "This is going to take more than 5 minutes." While Patty typed furiously on her computer, I caressed the key to the safe deposit box. What was inside there was not money. It was something much more valuable, something I had put away 40 years ago, a life insurance policy against ingratitude that I never thought I would have to use. But the day had come. The screen of Patty's computer flickered, reflecting my deformed but triumphant face. My sons whispered frantically in the corner. They did not know that the real blow was not freezing the accounts. That was just the distraction. The real blow was sleeping in box 714, waiting to see the light. When Patty placed the first document in front of me and handed me the pen, my right hand did not tremble. I signed my name, Sylvia Vance. Every letter was a declaration of war. I looked up and saw Richard take out his phone, probably to call his lawyer or his wife. Too late, the machinery was already in motion. "Ready, Mrs. Vance?" Patty asked. "We are just getting started," I replied. And for the first time in days, I felt that the future was not a dark tunnel, but a path I was going to pave myself, brick by brick, over my son's broken expectations. The sound of the buzzer announcing the opening of the vault rang like heavenly music in my ears. The air inside the bank vault has always had a particular taste, a mix of cold metal, old paper, and that static electricity produced by other people's greed. As Patty turned her master key in the lock and I inserted mine with my right hand, the one that still obeyed, without complaining, I felt time stand still. My sons had stayed outside behind the security gate, watching like two bloodhounds who just had the butcher shop door slammed in their faces. I could feel their stares fixed on the back of my neck, loaded with impatience, and that subtle fear weak men have when they lose control of the remote. The mechanism of box 714 clicked with a smoothness that contrasted with the chaos of my recent life. Patty, with that professional discretion that is worth its weight in gold, took a few steps back, giving me the privacy that protocol demanded. I pulled the metal box toward me. It was heavy, not because of what it physically contained, but because of the moral weight it carried inside. As I lifted the lid, the smell of mothballs and old documents hit me, bringing back memories of a younger Sylvia, a woman who already suspected this day would come, even though she prayed it would not. There were no gold bars, no wads of marked bills. What my fingers brushed against was something much more lethal to Richard and Stephen's aspirations. An embossed leather folder and a hardcover notebook, one of those accounting ledgers they do not make anymore. I opened the folder first. There it was, the original deed for the land where the Anvil hardware sits. My sons, in their arrogance as college graduates, always assumed that the business was part of the inheritance from their father, my late husband. They never bothered to read the fine print in the public records. The land, that huge lot in the industrial zone that is worth a fortune today, was bought by me, Sylvia Vance, with my grandmother's inheritance and my savings as a single woman, 2 years before getting married. It was under a separate property agreement. The building, the shelving, the inventory, they could fight for that. But the ground, the very earth under their feet, was mine, absolutely mine. And in this country, the owner of the land holds all the cards. If I wanted to, I could charge them retroactive rent that would leave them on the street, or simply terminate the use agreement and force them to move 1.5 tons of screws to the sidewalk. Then I picked up the notebook. The Book of Shames. That is what I called it to myself. For 30 years, every time Richard had a financial slip-up or Stephen needed a silent bailout, I wrote it down. Date, amount, reason. From the time Richard forged my signature to buy a motorcycle at 20, to the $10,000 I had to put up to cover the embezzlement he did at his first job so he would not go to jail. Everything was there, documented with receipts, promissory notes signed by them, and copies of checks. I turned the pages with my good hand. The blue ink narrated the story of my own maternal blindness. I had paid for their mistakes thinking I was buying their loyalty, or at least their gratitude. How stupid I was. The only thing I bought was their uselessness. By covering up their failures, I took away their chance to become real men. Now, those spoiled 50-year-old boys were looking at me from the other side of the bulletproof glass, waiting for Mom to finish her tantrums so they could lock her up. I stopped on a recent page. A loan from 6 months ago that Stephen asked me for the grandkids' tuition. A lie. I found out later it was to pay for a trip to a resort with his mistress. I said nothing at the time. I just wrote it down. The total sum of what they owed me, with legal interest, far exceeded any inheritance they expected to receive. Technically, they were bankrupt, and I was their main creditor. I slammed the box shut. The metallic sound echoed like a gunshot in the small room. "Everything in order, Mrs. Vance?" Patty asked, approaching cautiously. "Better than in order, Patty. Everything is in its place," I replied, putting the folder and notebook in my purse, making sure they went all the way to the bottom, under the tissues and the blood pressure pills. I leaned on the cane to stand up. My left leg was tingling, an annoying sensation like thousands of ants walking under my skin, but I no longer felt sick. The illness feeds on fear and despair, and I had just injected myself with a pure dose of power. I looked at myself in the reflection of the polished metal of the safe deposit boxes. My mouth was a bit crooked, my eyelid drooped, and my gray hair was messy. I looked like a vulnerable old lady. Perfect, I thought. Let them keep seeing the little old lady. The blow hurts more when you do not see it coming. I walked out of the vault, dragging my feet a little more than necessary. As I crossed the gate, Richard lunged at me, not with concern, but with annoyance. "Finally, Mom! We have been here for 40 minutes. The director of the home just sent me a message. He says if we do not get there before 6, we lose the room reservation." "It is done, son, it is done," I said with a trembling voice, playing my part. "I just wanted to look at my old papers. A person gets sentimental, old people stuff." Stephen looked at my purse, which now looked bulkier. "Did you take something out? Jewelry?" "You should give it to us to keep safe, Mom. You could get robbed at the nursing home." "No, son. Just some letters from your father and some photos." I lied without blinking. "Worthless papers, sentimental trash?" Richard snorted, relieved that it was not cash bulging in my purse. "Well, let's go. Patty, thanks for everything. I do not think my mother will need to come in person for a good while. You can handle anything with me. I have power of attorney." Patty looked at me. I winked my good eye, an almost imperceptible gesture. She, smart as she was, understood that the game was not over. "Of course, Mr. Richard, but remember that power of attorney can have nuances. Have a good afternoon." We left the bank. The afternoon sun was starting to set, dyeing the sky a dirty orange. The city traffic roared like a hungry beast. They helped me into the car with that fake delicacy that made me nauseous. Richard buckled my seatbelt as if I were a little girl. "Now, straight to Sunset Meadows," Richard announced, starting the engine abruptly. "You will see, Mom. You will love it. They have a garden. They have nurses all day long. You will be better off than alone at your house." I leaned back into the leather seat, hugging my purse to my chest. I closed my eyes and let them talk. They filled the silence with empty justifications, trying to convince themselves that they were good sons doing the right thing. "It is just that the house is too big for her alone, Stephen. Besides, the stairs are dangerous." "Yeah, and the maintenance. That dampness on the back wall. We have to sell it fast before it falls apart. With that money, we can pay for the home and have plenty left over to invest in the hardware store. We have to modernize the inventory." I listened to their plans. They were already dividing up the loot, selling my house, modernizing my hardware store, investing my money. They felt like they owned the world. They did not know that in the back seat they were carrying a judge with the verdict already written in her purse. As the car moved through the streets, I began to draw the map of my counterattack. I could not do it all today. Today I was tired, my body demanded rest, and my brain, although lucid, needed to process the trauma of the stroke. I needed time. And the nursing home, ironically, would give me that. They thought they were locking me in a prison. But in reality, they were sending me to a bunker. There, I would have a roof, food, and medical care paid for now, with the money they thought they controlled. No one would suspect a poor old woman abandoned in a nursing home. From there, without the distractions of the house and the business, I could move my pieces. "We are arriving," Stephen said, pointing to a large, exposed brick building, surrounded by a high fence. It looked like a private high school or a minimum security prison. The sign, Sunset Meadows, shone with pretentious gold letters. I felt a knot in my stomach. I will not lie. The idea of sleeping in a strange bed, surrounded by strangers and the smell of disinfectant, terrified me. All my life I had been the queen of my castle, but I remembered the words of my father, a country man who knew about hard times. "Sometimes, Sylvia, you have to duck your head so the stone flies over and hits the guy behind you." The car stopped at the main entrance. A heavily built male nurse came out with a wheelchair. Richard rolled down the window. "We are bringing Mrs. Vance, a new admission." "Ah, yes, we were expecting you." They opened my door. The cool afternoon air hit my face. They helped me out and sat me in the wheelchair. I hated that chair instantly. I hated feeling pushed, but I did not protest. I clutched my purse tighter. "We are going to the office to sign the admission papers and leave the billing information," Richard told the nurse. "Take my mother to her room and get her settled." He leaned down to kiss me on the forehead. His lips were dry and cold. "Behave yourself, Mom. We will come visit you on Sunday." And, "Yeah, Mom, get some rest," Stephen added without getting too close, as if old age were contagious. I watched them walk away toward the administrative office, walking with that triumphant air of someone who has just closed a tough deal. They loosened their ties. They laughed at something Richard muttered under his breath. They thought they had won. They thought the Sylvia problem was solved and filed away. The nurse started pushing me inside the building. "Welcome, Mrs. Vance. You will see it is peaceful here. We have bingo on Tuesdays and occupational therapy on Thursdays." I did not answer him. My mind was somewhere else. I was calculating. Tomorrow is Sunday. The banks are closed. But Monday? First thing Monday morning, Patty would execute the order I left signed before leaving. The total lockdown. The company credit cards, which Richard and Stephen used as if they were their own, would stop going through. The checks that Stephen had surely already written would bounce like rubber balls, and access to the joint accounts would disappear. When they realized it, they would run to the bank. And there, Patty would tell them in her sweetest tone that the account holder had revoked their permissions. They would come here, furious, to demand that I sign again. And it will be then, in this lobby of Sunset Meadows, where I will take out my notebook and my deed. We got into the elevator. The nurse hummed a popular song. I looked at my reflection in the metal doors. I no longer saw the stroke victim. I saw the owner of the hardware store. I saw the woman who negotiated with truckers and bricklayers. They took me to a shared room. There was another lady in the next bed asleep with her mouth open, snoring softly. The room was clean, impersonal, depressing. They helped me move to the bed. "I am leaving the call button right here in case you need anything," the nurse said. "Dinner is at 7. When he left and closed the door, I was alone in the gloom. I took the hardcover notebook out of my purse and put it under my pillow. It was hard and uncomfortable, but it gave me more security than any gun. My sons had underestimated me. They had forgotten the most important lesson you learn in a hardware store. It does not matter how much you paint a wall to cover up the crack. If the foundation moves, the house falls down. And I, Sylvia Vance, was the foundation. I smiled in the darkness, a crooked, incomplete, but fierce smile. I was not going to cry. I was not going to complain. I was going to wait. I was going to let them spend the weekend celebrating their victory, spending money on credit that they no longer had. The real paralysis was not in my face. It was the one they were going to feel on Monday morning when their cards got declined at the fancy restaurant where they were surely planning to toast to my confinement. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep, rather to visualize the exact moment when my son's house of cards would collapse with a simple breath from this tired old woman. The game was just beginning. Sunday at Sunset Meadows passed with the slowness of a drop of paint running down a wall. I quickly learned that in these places, time is not measured in hours, but in pills and trays of bland food. I got mashed potatoes that tasted like wet cardboard and a Jell-O that trembled with the same fear I saw in the eyes of the lady in the next bed. But while my body rested in that hospital bed, my mind was working at 1,000 revolutions per minute, like an industrial drill punching through concrete. My left arm still felt heavy, a rusted tool that needed oil. But my right hand never for a moment let go of the small hardcover notebook I kept under the pillow. Richard and Stephen did not come on Sunday. They were surely busy spending on credit, celebrating their freedom and mine, which to them meant financial freedom and to me confinement. Poor fools. They did not know that they were building the real prison themselves with every credit card they swiped. Monday dawned gray. From the window of my shared room, I could see the inner courtyard of the home, where a few old people were sunbathing like resigned lizards. I did not go out. I asked to stay in bed, claiming fatigue. The nurse on duty, a young girl named Sunny, who chewed gum with far too much enthusiasm, looked at me with pity. "Get some rest, Grandma Sylvia. It is normal to feel this way the first few days." Grandma. The words scraped against me like coarse grit sandpaper. If she knew that this grandma was about to detonate a financial bomb in the middle of the city, she would choke on her gum. At 9 in the morning, I asked to use the landline at the nurse's station. I said I wanted to call my grandson to wish him luck on a test. A lie. I dialed the number of the hardware store straight to the private line in the warehouse, the one that was only answered by Ray, my trusted foreman for the last 30 years. The Anvil Hardware Warehouse. His hoarse voice answered, used to shouting over the noise of saws and trucks. "Ray, it is me." There was a silence on the other end, then a sigh of genuine relief. "Mrs. Vance, thank God. Mr. Richard told us you were very ill, that you did not recognize anyone anymore. We were very worried." "Richard speaks more than he thinks, Ray. Listen to me carefully, because I do not have much time and I do not want the nurses to hear me. Are you alone?" "Yes, boss. I am in the back office." "Good. Starting today, the cement protocol goes into effect. Do you remember what we agreed on 5 years ago when I had my gallbladder out?" "Of course I do, Mrs. Vance. Nothing goes out, nothing comes in without your original signature. Inventory locked down." "Exactly. But this time it is stricter. Richard and Stephen are going to try to take material or money from petty cash. They might try to sell large tools. Do not let them. If they get pushy, tell them the computer system is locked and you do not have the password." "Understood. But boss, they are your sons. What if they bring a signed paper? Any paper they bring is toilet paper if it does not have my personal seal, the one I keep in the bank safe. And Ray, if they try to fire you, you stand your ground like a pillar. They do not pay your salary. I pay it, and I am still alive. Whatever you say, Mrs. Vance, not a single nail is moving around here." I hung up the phone with a satisfaction that ran through my body better than any medicine. I went back to my room, dragging my feet, faking that fragility that so reassured my captors, and I sat down to wait. The storm broke at 11:30. I knew it not because I had a crystal ball, but because I knew my son's habits. At that time, Richard usually had lunch with suppliers to close deals, which were usually excuses to eat and drink for free, and Stephen made the rounds of the banks to cover the financial holes from the previous week. I imagined the scene. Richard at the grill restaurant, asking for the check after treating 3 potential partners. The waiter swiping the hardware store's corporate platinum card. The machine letting out that high-pitched, hateful beep. Declined. Richard laughing nervously, saying it must be the chip and handing over another card. Declined. And then the personal one that was linked to my accounts as an authorized user. Insufficient funds or account frozen. The shame. That red heat rising up his neck, having to ask one of the guests to pay the check. For a man with Richard's ego, that was worse than a slap in the face. And Stephen must have been at the bank teller window trying to cash a check for operational expenses. The teller looking at him with a poker face, handing the slip of paper back and telling him in a low voice, "I am sorry, Mr. Vance. The account holder has revoked all signing powers. The account is frozen to third parties." I smiled as I ate a spoonful of cold noodle soup. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. In my case, it was served with a side dish of my son's incompetence. At 1 in the afternoon, my personal cell phone, which I had kept turned off and hidden at the bottom of my purse inside the closet, started to vibrate. I did not answer it. I let it vibrate against the wood, a constant, desperate buzz. 1, 2, 10 calls. Richard, Stephen, Richard again. Finally, they showed up. They did not walk in. They blew in like a hurricane. I heard Richard's yelling in the hallway long before I saw him. "I want to see my mother right now. It is an emergency." My bedroom door burst open. Richard was sweating, his tie loosened and his face an alarming purple color. Stephen came in behind him, pale and trembling, with a briefcase under his arm. I was sitting in my armchair, looking out at the garden with a book in my lap. I turned my head slowly, emphasizing my supposed sluggishness. "Boys, what a surprise! It is not Sunday. Did something happen?" Richard slammed the door shut, startling my roommate, who woke up with a jump. "Did something happen?" Richard hissed, approaching me with his fists clenched. He stopped a few feet away, perhaps remembering that he was in a public place and that assaulting an old woman did not look good. "You know perfectly well what happened. The cards, the accounts, everything is frozen." I looked at him with innocent eyes, blinking slowly. Frozen? How strange. It must be a system error. You know how computers are nowadays. "It is not a system error," Stephen yelled, his voice cracking. "I went to the bank. They told me you went in on Saturday and signed a revocation of powers. Mom, have you gone crazy? We have suppliers to pay today. 3 checks bounced on me. 3. "Ah, that," I said, smoothing out the wrinkle in my robe. "Yes, Patty recommended I do it." "What?" Richard looked like he was about to explode. "Why would you do that?" "For security, son," I replied, using that condescending maternal tone that used to drive them crazy when they were teenagers. "You yourselves said that I am not making sense anymore, that I need special care, that I had a stroke. The bank has very strict protocols to protect the assets of people who are vulnerable." I saw them exchange panicked looks. They had fallen into their own trap. They had used my supposed incompetence to lock me up, and now I was using that same incompetence to tie their hands. "But Mom," Richard tried to reason, lowering his tone, trying to go back to his charming manipulator strategy. "We are your sons. We take care of the business for you. If you freeze the accounts, the hardware store goes under. Do you want Dad's legacy to be lost?" There it was, the low blow. Dad's legacy. They always used my husband's memory to manipulate me, but this time the shield of guilt did not work. "The hardware store is not going to go under, Richard," I said, hardening my voice a bit. My crooked mouth felt tense, but my words came out clear. "The hardware store has reserves and it has an owner." "You cannot run it from here," Stephen spat. "Look at yourself. You can barely hold a book. You need us to sign for the payments. Unfreeze the accounts, Mom. Sign this paper right now to reinstate the powers." Stephen pulled a crumpled document out of his briefcase and shoved it in my face, along with a pen. I looked at the paper. It was a broad general power of attorney. If I signed that, I would be giving them permission to even sell my kidneys. No, I said, simple, dry like the strike of a hammer. What do you mean, no? Richard ran his hand through his hair in despair. Mom, this is serious. We have commitments. Commitments? I repeated the word, savoring it like it was a bitter piece of candy. Are you referring to the cement suppliers, Richard? Or are you referring to that gambling debt you have with the Russian that is due tomorrow? The silence that followed my question was absolute. Even my roommate's snores seemed to stop. Richard turned as white as the wall. Stephen opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What? How? Richard stammered. How do I know? I leaned forward, leaning on my cane, dropping the senile old lady mask for a moment. My eyes locked onto his with the intensity of two steel nails. I am old, Richard, not stupid, and I have ears everywhere. I know about the $10,000 you owe, and I know you were planning to take it out of the employee payroll account. Richard stepped back as if I had physically slapped him. Mom, I can explain. I do not want explanations. I want results, and I want respect. Mom, please, Stephen moaned, seeing the ship sinking. If we do not pay today, they are going to cut off our credit. Then learn to negotiate, I said, leaning back in the armchair again. You wanted control, right? You wanted to be the men of the house. Well, real men solve problems without hiding behind their mother's skirts. You are ruining us, Richard yelled, losing his composure again. You are locked up in here. We have the power on the outside. We can sell the inventory. We can fire Ray. Try it, I challenged him, with a calmness that surprised even me. Call Ray, try to take a single bag of cement out of the warehouse. Let's see who has the power. Richard pulled out his phone and dialed frantically. He put it on speaker, wanting to show me his authority. Ray, I need you to load truck 3 with all the half-inch rebar. It is going out right now. Ray's voice sounded metallic and firm through the speaker. I am sorry, Mr. Richard. The inventory is locked down for audit. Orders from the owner. I am the owner, Richard bellowed. On the papers I have right here, the owner is Mrs. Sylvia Vance, and she called me this morning. As long as she is breathing, whatever she says goes around here. Richard hung up the call furiously, almost breaking the phone screen. He looked at me with a hatred I had never seen in the eyes of a son toward a mother. It was the hatred of a parasite when the host decides to take deworming medicine. This is not over, he threatened in a low voice. You are old, Mom. You are sick. We are going to have you declared legally incompetent. We are going to prove that you are crazy. And then we will have everything. Everything. Maybe, I said, shrugging my shoulders, but lawsuits take months, Richard, sometimes years, and the Russian does not wait for months, does he? Richard trembled. He knew I was right. He knew that I held the key to their salvation and that I had just flushed it down the toilet. What do you want? Asked Stephen, defeated. What do you want to unfreeze the accounts? I want you to leave, I said, pointing to the door with my good hand. I want to eat my flavorless Jell-O in peace, and I want you to bring me the accounting books for the last 5 years tomorrow, right here, to this room. What for? Richard asked. Because I am going to audit them, myself, and if I find a single penny out of place, well, let's just say that the frozen accounts will be the least of your problems. You cannot do that, Richard shrieked. It is humiliating. Humiliating is having your own sons drag you out of your house like an old piece of furniture just to keep your money, I replied, feeling the anger heat my blood. Now get out of here, I'm tired. They stood there for another moment, powerless, furious, trapped in an invisible web they had helped to weave themselves. Finally, Richard turned around and stormed out in a rage. Stephen looked at me one last time with a mix of fear and pleading, but seeing my stone-cold face, he lowered his head and followed his brother. When the door closed, I let out the air I had been holding in. My left hand trembled uncontrollably on my lap. The effort of keeping my composure had been titanic. I felt exhausted, but strangely alive. I pulled the hardcover notebook from under my pillow and opened it. I looked for the page where Richard's debt with the loan shark was written down. I had discovered it 2 weeks ago, listening to a phone conversation he thought was private. I grabbed a pen from the nightstand and, with my handwriting now a little shaky but legible, I wrote down today's date, Monday. Extortion attempt failed. They were notified that the faucet was turned off. I looked around the sad nursing home room. The cream-colored walls, the smell of disinfectant, the distant sound of a television. They thought they had exiled me to nowhere. They did not understand that, for a woman who built an empire selling screws and dealing with cheating contractors, this place was not a prison. It was my headquarters. And the best part of all was that they still did not know about the property deed. They thought the problem was only the liquid cash. They did not know that the ground they walked on, the roof they worked under, no longer offered them any security. I leaned back on the pillow, feeling the comforting weight of the notebook under my head. Tomorrow they would come with the accounting books, thinking they could trick me with fake numbers. They did not know that I read balance sheets better than cooking recipes. Sunny, the nurse, came in with my dinner. "Here you go, Grandma. Today we have chicken and mashed potatoes." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, smiling with my half-smile. "I'm very hungry today." I ate with a real appetite for the first time in days. I needed my strength. The silent execution had been a success, but the open war was about to begin. And I, Sylvia Vance, had all the time in the world and a notebook full of ammunition. When I finished, I wiped my mouth with the paper napkin and looked at my reflection in the dark window. "Rust never sleeps," my father used to say, and neither do I. Tonight, while my sons twist and turn looking for money under every rock, I will sleep like a baby. Because tomorrow I will teach them the true meaning of the word owner. On Tuesday morning, my sons arrived looking like 2 castaways who had spent the night floating on a wooden plank in the middle of a shark-infested ocean. Richard wore a wrinkled shirt, something unthinkable for him, since he always looked like a storefront mannequin, and Stephen had dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked painted on with charcoal. They did not come alone. They brought 3 archive boxes full of folders and an attitude that swung between desperate pleading and contained aggression. I was waiting for them in the small visiting room at Sunset Meadows, sitting in my wheelchair like a queen on her throne, with my good hand resting on my cane and the bad one settled on my lap. "Here are the books, Mom," Richard said, dropping one of the boxes onto the coffee table with a heavy thud that made the plastic vase rattle. "Just like you asked. Now, for the love of God, sign the checks. The steel supplier already threatened to stop the delivery truck on the highway." I did not move. I just looked up and stared at them with that infuriating calmness you get when you have nothing left to lose. The smell of fear coming off them was stronger than the pine disinfectant on the floor. "Sit down," I ordered, pointing at the vinyl sofa across from me, "and lower your voices. People come here to rest, not to listen to the shouting of 2 failed businessmen." Stephen collapsed onto the sofa, rubbing his temples. "Mom, the Russian called my house last night," he whispered with a trembling voice. "He spoke to Lauren. He told her he knows which school the kids go to. Mom, this is dangerous. We need to unfreeze the money right now." I felt a pang in my chest. My grandchildren. Those 2 useless fools had put my grandchildren in danger because of their vices and their poor judgment. But if I gave in now, if I signed those checks out of fear, they would never learn, and they would keep digging the hole until it swallowed us all. I had to be tough. Tougher than the wrought iron we sold. "Then we better start the audit quickly," I said, ignoring his panic. "Open last year's box. I want to see the section for entertainment expenses." Richard snorted. He opened the box with jerky movements and pulled out a blue folder. "There it is, all legal. Meals with clients, business trips, the usual for a company our size. I do not know what you expect to find, Mom." "You do not understand how modern business is done anymore. Nowadays, you have to invest in public relations." I put on my reading glasses, the ones hanging from a little gold chain around my neck, and pulled the folder closer. My left hand was useless for turning pages, so I did it slowly with my right, taking my time, savoring their impatience. Dinner at the steakhouse, $1,200, I read from the paper. Date, February 14th. How curious, Richard. Since when is Valentine's Day a date to close deals with cement suppliers? Or could it be that you took that secretary of yours, that Pamela girl, to eat lobster on the hardware store's dime? Richard turned red all the way to his hairline. It was a strategic meeting, he stammered. Save me the fairy tale, I cut him off. And right here, prospecting trip to Miami, 5 days, 5-star hotel, Stephen. What were we going to prospect in Miami? Golden screws. Because as far as I remember, we've not imported anything from down there since 1998. Stephen looked at the ground, unable to hold my gaze. Mom, those are necessary expenses for the corporate image. He tried to defend himself, but his voice was a mere whisper. I slammed the folder shut. Corporate image. You boys think I am a dumb old woman who was born yesterday. You have been bleeding the business dry. You have been living like kings off the cash flow money. And now that the faucet has been turned off, you are drowning. Sales went down, Richard yelled, standing up. The economy is bad. It is not our fault. Oh, really? I asked, and with a slow movement I pulled the hardcover notebook out of my purse, the book of shames. I placed it on the table, right next to their fake folders. It was a simple, cheap notebook, the kind they sell at the corner convenience store. But to them, it must have looked like a book of witchcraft. What is that? Richard asked, eyeing the notebook with suspicion. This, my son, is the real accounting. The one I keep from my desk, looking at every invoice that comes in and every payment that goes out. Even though you thought I was asleep or watching soap operas, I opened the notebook to a page marked with a red paperclip. October of last year. We were short $20,000 to pay the taxes. You told the accountant it was a calculation error. But right here I have it written down that 3 days prior, you, Richard, took that exact amount in cash out of the safe. And coincidentally, 3 days later, you traded in your truck for that 4x4 monstrosity you have parked outside. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but I did not give him time. January of this year, Stephen, you took out a bank loan in the company's name for $50,000 to remodel the warehouse. The warehouse is still just as old, with the exact same leaks, but... Oh, surprise, your wife showed up with a new diamond ring and you two went on a 2-week vacation to Europe. I read them the list. A litany of petty thefts, blatant embezzlements, and white lies. With every date, with every figure, they shrank smaller and smaller. The air of superiority they had walked in with had completely evaporated. Now they were just 2 naughty little boys caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Only this jar was worth millions, and the cookies were my 40 years of sacrifice. How? Stephen was pale as wax. How did you know all this? Because I am your mother, I said, closing the notebook gently, and because the business is my life. You boys only see the money. I see the effort. Richard, cornered, decided to attack. It was in his nature. Whenever he felt wounded, he would bite. Very well, you caught us. Congratulations, Sherlock Holmes, he said with venomous sarcasm, even though his lip was quivering. We spent money. So what? We are the managers. We work there. We have the right to certain perks. Besides, what are you going to do? Turn us in? We are your sons. If you turn us in, the scandal will destroy the hardware store anyway, and you will be left all alone in this stinking nursing home until you die. He leaned over the table, invading my space, trying to intimidate me with his height and his anger. Unfreeze the accounts, Mom. Right now. Oh, or I swear we are going to have you declared incompetent. We are going to bring in psychiatrists. We will say you made all this up in your sick head. We have power of attorney over the company. You have the majority of the shares, sure, but we are the legal administrators. We can sell the assets. We can liquidate the inventory tomorrow morning and leave you with an empty shell. There it was, the final threat. They believed they held all the cards because their names were on the corporation's articles of incorporation as administrators. They thought they could sell everything: the delivery trucks, the merchandise, the shelving, and the building. I smiled. It was not a pretty smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a lamb voluntarily walk into its cave. "You are right," I said, leaning back in my wheelchair. "You are the administrators of the Anvil Hardware Incorporated. You can sell the screws, you can sell the cement, you can even sell the desks if you want." Richard smiled triumphantly, believing that I had surrendered. "Exactly. So stop playing games and sign." "But there is one little detail, Richard, one tiny little detail that slipped your minds in your grand master plan." I reached into my purse again. My fingers brushed against the rough texture of the leather folder I had taken out of the bank's safe deposit box. I pulled it out slowly, enjoying every single second of their confusion. "What is that now?" Stephen asked, wiping the sweat from his forehead. I took out the yellowed document, bearing old official seals and signatures in black ink that was starting to fade, but which remained legally indestructible. I unfolded it on the table, smoothing it out with the palm of my hand. "Read it," I said. Richard leaned in, narrowing his eyes. "Public deed number, purchase and sale of real estate." "What is this?" "It is the deed for the land and the building where the hardware store operates," I explained in an educational tone, as if I were teaching a child to read. "Look closely at the name of the owner." Richard read in silence. His eyes widened so much I thought they were going to pop out of their sockets. "Sylvia Vance. Single woman, in her own right." He read, and his voice trailed off until it became a mere whisper. "But Dad said everything belonged to the company." "Your father used to say a lot of things," I replied. "But your father did not put a single dime into buying that land. I bought it myself, 2 years before we got married, with my grandmother's inheritance. I built the building myself. The corporation you boys manage is nothing more than a tenant. It operates on my property." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, deadly. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator out in the hallway. "Do you understand what that means, you financial geniuses?" I continued relentlessly. "It means you do not have any real assets. The company does not own the premises. If you try to sell the hardware store, you can only sell the name and the merchandise. But nobody is going to buy a business that has nowhere to operate." Richard dropped onto the sofa as if someone had cut the strings holding him up. He stared at the document as if it were a death sentence. "And the best part of all," I added, delivering the final blow, "is that we never signed a formal lease agreement. It was a verbal agreement with your father, which means that, legally, I can evict you whenever I want." "No, you cannot do that," Stephen whined. "If you kick us out, we lose everything." "Exactly. That is the whole point." I sat up straighter in my chair, ignoring the pain in my back. I felt like a giant. "So here is the situation. You two have gambling debts and a company you cannot operate because I froze your accounts. And if you try to sell anything or have me declared insane, I will simply terminate your land use agreement and put you out on the street with your boxes of screws. How do you think the Russian will react when he finds out you do not even have a pot to piss in?" Richard covered his face with his hands. Stephen started to cry, a silent, pathetic cry. "Mom, please, they are going to kill us," Stephen sobbed. "The Russian does not mess around." I looked at him, and for a split second I saw the little boy who used to scrape his knees and come running for me to heal him. My mother's heart squeezed tight. But then I remembered how they had dragged me out of my own home, how they had treated me like a burden, how they had planned to leave me here forever while they squandered my legacy. I could not give in. If I saved them now without any consequences, I would be condemning them forever. "Nobody is going to kill you," I said firmly, "because I am going to pay off the debt." Richard lifted his head with a spark of hope in his eyes. "You will? You will pay the $10,000? "Yes, but it will not be free, and it will not be a gift. Whatever it takes, Mom. Anything," Richard said desperately. "First, you are going to sign your resignation as administrators of the hardware store. Today, Ray will take over as interim general manager. You two will become employees. Yes, employees, with a base salary and a clock-in and clock-out schedule. And you are going to punch a time card." "But Mom, we are the owners," Richard protested, though with very little conviction. "You are the owners of some shares that are completely worthless without my land. Do you want the salary or do you want the street?" "The salary," Richard muttered, defeated. "Second, you are going to go to therapy. Both of you. Therapy for the gambling addiction and for whatever it is you have in your heads that makes you believe the world owes you everything. I will pay for the sessions, but I want attendance reports." "Okay," Stephen said, nodding quickly. "And third—" I took a dramatic pause, looking around the nursing home's visiting room. "I am staying right here." The two of them looked at me, completely confused. "What?" asked Stephen. "No, Mom. If you pay and fix everything, you can come back home. We will get you out of here today. It was a mistake." "We are sorry. Come back to your apartment." "No," I replied, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt a strange sense of peace. "I am staying, for now. Here I have a roof, food, and nurses. And most importantly, here I am far away from you two. I need to recover from my stroke. I need to do my physical therapy exercises without seeing your faces of disappointment every single day. And I need to plan the future of my company without you two buzzing in my ear." "But what are people going to say?" Richard asked, always worried about appearances. "They will say we abandoned you." "Let them say whatever they want. You are going to make sure to tell them that I am here for specialized rehab, and you will come visit me every Sunday. And you will bring me the sales reports, and if I see a single penny missing, a single nail gone, I will call the police and evict you from the building. Are we clear?" Richard and Stephen looked at each other. They were destroyed. They had walked in looking for a quick signature to keep the party going, and they were walking out turned into their own mother's employees, under strict surveillance and on a very short leash. "We are clear, Mom," Richard said, his voice breaking. "Good. Now hand me that pen." Richard handed me his fancy fountain pen with a trembling hand. "Are you going to sign the checks for the suppliers?" he asked hopefully. "I am going to sign only one," I said, "for the Russian. You are going to go deliver it to him personally, and you are going to tell him the debt is settled, and that if he ever lends you money again, he will have to deal with me. And believe me, that man would rather deal with the police than with an angry Sylvia Vance." I signed the check with my right hand, resting the paper on top of my property deed. My signature came out firm, large, taking up the whole space. I tore the check from the checkbook and held it out to Richard. He took it as if it were a sacred relic. "Now get out of here," I said, leaning back again and closing my eyes. "I am tired. And take your boxes of lies with you. Tomorrow I want Ray here at 10 o'clock sharp with the real books." I listened as they packed up their things. I heard their heavy footsteps walking away, dragging their feet like condemned men. I heard the door click shut. I opened my eyes. The room was empty except for the dust floating in a ray of sunlight. My entire body ached. The tension had been brutal. But when I looked down at my left hand, the one that had been dead and useless, I saw that my fingers were curled into a fist. A weak fist, yes, but a fist nonetheless. I had regained control, not just of my money, but of my entire life. My sons thought they were sending me to the slaughterhouse, but in reality they had given me the time and space to sharpen my knives. Sunny, the nurse, poked her head through the door. "Grandma Sylvia, is everything okay? I heard loud voices." "Do you want me to bring you some tea?" I looked at her and smiled. This time the smile actually reached my eyes. "Yes, sweetie. Bring me some tea, but make it strong. And if you have any of those cookies you save for special guests, bring me too. Today I have something to celebrate." I looked out the window toward the garden. A group of birds was fighting over some breadcrumbs. That was how life was, a constant fight, but I was no longer a crumb. I have my own coffee maker, which is strictly forbidden by the rules, but tolerated by the director because I donated the paint for the front of the building. And it smells like carbon paper. The desk I had brought over from my house takes up the space where the visitor's armchair used to be. From right here, with a view of the hydrangea garden, I run my empire. My left arm has recovered 70% of its mobility thanks to therapy, but mostly thanks to the sheer stubbornness of wanting to turn the pages of the accounting books with my very own hands. It is 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. The door opens after 2 respectful knocks. It is not a nurse bringing me pills. It is Ray, my foreman, holding the urgent matters folder. Behind him, carrying boxes of ceramic tile samples, Richard and Stephen walk in. "Good morning, boss," Ray greets me, taking off his cap with that old-school respect you rarely see anymore. "Here are the reports for the week. The cement truck arrived on time." "Good job, Ray." "Put it over there, and what about the boys?" I ask, pointing with my chin at my sons. Richard, who has lost 10 pounds and that air of entitlement his expensive dinner belly used to give him, sets his box on the floor and wipes the sweat from his forehead. He no longer wears 3-piece Italian suits to go to the hardware store. Now he wears a good pair of blue jeans and a polo shirt with the Anvil Hardware logo embroidered on the chest. He looks, for the very first time in his entire life, like a working man. "Mom? I mean, Mrs. Vance," Richard corrects himself, stuttering slightly. "It is part of the agreement." "During business hours, I am the boss. I brought the samples for the new non-slip flooring. I think the gray option is better for the industrial market. It holds up better against heavy traffic." I peer at him over the rims of my glasses. Before, Richard would have chosen the most expensive flooring just to pocket a kickback under the table. Now he is actually thinking about durability. "Did you run the stress test on it?" I ask. "Yes." "I drove the forklift over it 3 times. Not a single scratch." I nod, satisfied. "Good work, Richard. Approve the purchase of 2,000 square feet. But negotiate a 5% discount for paying in cash. We have the liquidity." Stephen, for his part, pulls out a tablet. He is now in charge of logistics and customer service at the front counter. His hands, which used to be as soft as a piano player's, now have a couple of Band-Aids on the fingers. "Boss?" Mrs. Martinez from the construction company called. She was furious about the delay on Monday, but I explained to her that it was a routing issue, and I offered her free freight on her next order. She calmed down. "Well handled, Stephen. But do not let that delay happen again. That free freight comes straight out of your productivity bonus." Stephen grimaces, but he nods without complaining. "Yes, ma'am." Seeing them like this, working, sweating, worrying about the actual business and not about some fantasy of being millionaires, is my greatest triumph. It was not easy. The first month they tried to rebel, they showed up late, they pouted. But every time they did, I would pull out the book of shames or casually mention the property deed. They learned real fast that the leash is short, but if they walk a straight line, there is food on their plates. The debt with the Russian was paid. It hurt to sign that check, to see that much money leave my reserves, but it was necessary. In exchange, I withhold 40% of their salary every single month to replenish that fund. According to my calculations, they will finish paying me back in 5 years. By then, they will either have learned the value of every single penny, or they will have quit. "You boys can go," I tell them. "Ray, stay here a moment." My sons walk out, murmuring about inventories and customers. When the door clicks shut, Ray smiles. "They are changing, boss." The other day, I saw Mr. Richard eating a sandwich out in the yard with the delivery drivers. I had never seen him do that before. Hunger and necessity are the best teachers, Ray. And the fear of losing the roof over your head helps too. You are something else, Mrs. Vance. Truly something else. When Ray leaves, I am left alone in my makeshift office. I stand up and walk toward the window. My left leg still drags just a little bit. A constant reminder that I am mortal, but I no longer need the cane for short distances. I look out toward the garden, where several residents are sitting on the new varnished wooden benches. Those benches were donated by the Anvil Hardware. Or rather, I sold them to the nursing home at a 100% discount in exchange for my sons coming over on a Sunday to assemble them. It was part of my moral rehabilitation plan. Seeing Richard and Stephen out there with screwdrivers in their hands, sweating in the sun, putting together furniture for old folks, was a show worth more than any movie ticket. But my influence did not stop at the benches. Once I decided to stay here, I realized that Sunset Meadows had a lot of cracks, both in its walls and in its soul. The food was terrible because the kitchen supplier was severely overcharging them. The nurses were exhausted because the shifts were poorly managed. I just could not help myself. It is in my nature. I started sticking my nose into things. First, I talked to the director. I offered her free consulting to review their supply contracts. In 2 weeks, I saved her 20% on operational costs. In return, I demanded that the extra money be invested into improving the menu. Now we eat real roasted chicken, not that gray boiled stuff, and we actually get fresh fruit for breakfast. Then I organized the residents. I discovered that my roommate, the lady who snored and who I thought was a lost cause, was a certified public accountant for 40 years. Her name is Mildred. One day, watching me struggle with some addition, she corrected my mental math. "Carry the one, dear," she told me, her eyes sparkling. Since then, Mildred has been my internal auditor. I pay her in Swiss chocolates that Ray brings me, and she feels useful again. She no longer spends her whole day sleeping. Now she eagerly waits for my folders, and she is not the only one. Arthur, the gentleman in room 302, was an agricultural engineer. Now he directs the facility's groundskeeper and has turned the backyard patio into a garden that gives us fresh tomatoes and herbs. Claire, a former seamstress, tailors the nurses' uniforms in exchange for extra visiting hours. I have turned this nursing home into a cooperative of forgotten talents. I walk out into the hallway. The whole atmosphere has changed. That depressing hospital silence is gone. There is activity. There is purpose. As I walk past the lounge area, I see a group playing dominoes, but they are not just killing time. They are betting cookies with a professional level of seriousness. "Mrs. Vance," calls out Sunny, the nurse, who now wears an impeccably tailored uniform thanks to Claire. "A package arrived for you. It feels pretty heavy." It is a brand new toolbox, a bright red professional-grade box. I open it. There is a note resting on top, written in Stephen's hurried handwriting. "Mom, we noticed your old screwdriver set was losing its grip. We thought this one might come in handy for your little adjustments around the home. We paid for it with our own salaries. We did not use the company card. We love you, Stephen and Richard." I feel a sudden lump in my throat. It is not because of the gift, it is because of the note. We paid for it with our own salaries. It is the first time in years that they have given me something that actually took effort for them to earn. I touch the cold metal of the tools. They are a top-tier brand. They know exactly what I like. Maybe, just maybe, all was not lost. Perhaps underneath the thick layers of selfishness and laziness that I myself allowed to grow. There still remained the boys I raised before the money corrupted them. I take the box back to my room. Mildred is in there, reviewing some electric bills with a magnifying glass. "Mildred, look at this," I tell her, showing off the box. "My son's." "Well, I'll be," she says, adjusting her glasses. "It looks like the shock therapy is working, Sylvia. Who would have thought? At 73 years old, you can still teach your kids a lesson. You never stop being a mother, Mildred, even if sometimes you have to mother them with a whip in one hand and a checkbook in the other." I sit down at my desk. It is time for my daily reflection. The doctor says I need to take moments just to breathe and lower my blood pressure. I close my eyes and think about my late husband, the true founder of all this. Even though I was the one who laid down the bricks, he was always the soft one. He gave them everything. Let them be, Sylvia. They are just boys, he would tell me. If he saw me right now, what would he think? I think he would laugh. He would laugh with that loud, booming laugh that used to rattle the windows. And he would tell me, "You old witch! In the end, you had to lay down the law all by yourself." The stroke was a warning, a slow-down order sent to me by life, but it was also a blessing wrapped in a tragedy. If it had not paralyzed my face, I never would have seen the true faces of my own sons. If they had not tried to lock me away, I never would have discovered the strength I had hidden deep inside my own rage. And I never would have found this place, this community of old warriors that society just threw away, but who still have so much fire burning inside them. Here, at Sunset Meadows, I am much freer than I was in my big, empty house. Over there, I was all alone with my memories. Here, I have a mission. I have people who depend on my mental clarity. I have Mildred, I have Arthur, I have Sonny, and I have my sons, not as parasites, but as apprentices who are finally starting to understand what life is really all about. I look down at my left hand. I curl it into a fist and open it, close and open. The movement is fluid. The strength has returned. I am no longer that broken woman who rolled out of the hospital in a wheelchair. I am Sylvia Vance, and I have been rebuilt with new, far more resilient parts. My cell phone rings. It is Richard. "Mom, I am sorry to bother you. It is just, tomorrow is Sunday. We wanted to know if we could bring the kids to see you. Lauren says the grandkids miss you and we want to do a barbecue out in the courtyard if the director gives us permission. We will bring everything." A barbecue with my grandchildren, without asking for a dime, without asking for any signatures, just asking for my time. The director will give permission, because I am the one who paid for the brand new grill out in the garden. I answer, trying not to let too much emotion show in my voice. "Come over at noon. And Richard?" "Yes, Mom. Bring the good charcoal, not that cheap stuff that burns out in 5 minutes. In this family, we do things right, or we do not do them at all." "Yes, Mom. The good stuff. Hickory wood." I hang up. One tear. Just one single tear. It escapes down my cheek, the one on the side that used to be paralyzed. I wipe it away quickly. There is no time for cheap sentimentality. There is work to be done. The next day, Sunday, is absolutely perfect. The sky is bright blue, completely clear of clouds. The garden at Sunset Meadows smells like barbecue and the sweet laughter of children. My grandkids, 2 little tornadoes aged 8 and 10, run between the wheelchairs and walkers, injecting a vital energy that makes even the grumpiest resident smile. I watch Richard standing in front of the grill, wearing a ridiculous apron that says, "The Grill King." He is sweating, carefully flipping the steaks. Stephen is pouring sodas for Betty and Mildred, patiently listening to their stories from their youth. Lauren, my daughter-in-law, who used to avoid even looking at me, is helping me cut the meat on my plate because she knows I still struggle a little to apply pressure with a knife and fork at the same time. "Thank you, sweetheart," I tell her. "You are welcome, Sylvia. You look really good. You really do. That color blouse looks great on you." I look around me. This is exactly what they had wanted to take away from me. They wanted to sell me off for the peace and quiet of a nursing home so they could buy their own destruction. But I had to come here. I had to seemingly lose everything, just so I could truly get it all back. Richard walks over with a plate of freshly grilled meat. "The first cut is for the boss," he says, setting it down in front of me. I look him right in the eyes. That veil of deception is completely gone. There is exhaustion, yes, because working hard is exhausting, but there is also dignity. Thank you, son. It smells great. Mom. Richard wipes his hands on his apron and gets serious for a moment. Stephen and I wanted to say, thank you. Thank you for what? For making you work like mules and taking half your paychecks? For not letting us fall, for paying off the Russian, and for giving us a second chance. Ray told us you were planning to sell us out to the competition if we did not straighten up. I smile. Ray and his big mouth. I was not going to sell you to the competition, Richard. Nobody buys damaged goods. I was going to send you out to sweep the streets, but I am glad you think that. Fear keeps a man alert. Richard laughs, a genuine laugh, nervous, but very real. I promise you, the hardware store is going to be the best in the state, Mom. We are planning a new line of eco-friendly construction products. Stephen ran the numbers and, shh. I quiet him down, holding up my hand. Today is Sunday. Today we do not talk about business. Today we eat and spend time together as a family. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I want that project on my desk. And those profit margins had better be correct. They will be. Mildred already told me that if there is a single mistake, she will pull my ears herself. That lady is even stricter than you are. She learned from the best. We eat under the shade of the trees. My grandchildren come over to hug me. They smell like sunshine and dirt. Grandma, when are you coming back home? Asked the youngest. Luke. A sudden silence falls over the table. Richard and Stephen look at me, expectant. Lauren sets her water glass down on the table. Everyone is waiting for the answer. I could go back. I could tell them to pack up my things tomorrow morning. My house is right over there, all alone, waiting for me with its echoes and its shadows. But I look over at Mildred, who is laughing with Stephen. I look at Arthur, who is teaching my oldest granddaughter how to prune a rosebush without hurting herself. I look at this building that used to be so sad and is now full of life, and I look at myself. I do not know, Luke, I answer, stroking his hair. Grandma has a lot of work to do here. I have a lot of friends who need me. And your dads. Well, your dads need just a little more time to learn how to steer the ship on their own. I look at my sons. They nod, understanding. They know it is not a punishment. It is a guarantee. As long as I am here, vigilant and strong, they will stay on the right path, and I will continue to have a purpose every single morning. The afternoon falls over Sunset Meadows. The sun dyes the brick walls a deep orange. When my sons finally leave, taking with them the smell of charcoal and the promises of returning next Sunday, I stay out in the garden for a little while longer. I pull out my small notebook, not the accounting ledger, but a brand new notebook where I jot down ideas. I write, Monday, review the budget for painting the dining room. Tuesday, meeting with Ray about the new eco-friendly line. Wednesday, arm physical therapy, and then teach Mildred how to use her tablet. I close the notebook. The air is crisp and cool. I feel completely fulfilled. My name is Sylvia Vance. I am 73 years old with a half-asleep arm and a family that almost destroyed me, but that I ended up rebuilding with my very own hands. They thought they were sending me to the end of the road, to the sunset of my life. But they were wrong. A sunset is merely the prelude to a new night, and the darkness is where the stars shine the brightest, and it is where we work best. Those of us who know that rust never sleeps. I stand up from my chair, grab my cane just out of habit, not out of necessity, and walk toward the entrance. Tomorrow is Monday, and there is so much, so very much to do. The hardware store opens at 8, but my office, right here in the heart of my new kingdom, never closes.